Welcome to Common Sense. Common Sense is a show that features interviews with interesting people so that we can learn in a clear, concise, and direct way who they are, what they do, and what makes sense to them and what doesn't. I'm Rudy Breglia, and today I'll be interviewing Bob Latta, who's representative to the House of Representatives and is in the 5th Congressional District, which will very shortly be contain all of Lorain County. And right now, he's a candidate for that office. Thank you for your service, Bob, and welcome to Common Sense.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, Bob, why don't you start off with some background, where you were born, where you've lived, that kind of thing.
Well, again, thanks for having me on this morning. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Going back in that early days, I was born in Bluffton, Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I always say I was a 3-day resident. My mom grew up on a very small farm in Putnam County,
Okay.
between Pandora and Columbus Grove.
Okay.
My dad was from a small town in Hancock County, Macomb, but when my parents had my sister, they were living in Macomb, so the hospital they used was in Bluffton. They moved to Bowling Green in 1955, and when
Okay.
I was born, they hadn't found another doctor, so they went right back down to Bluffton.
I see.
And so for 3 days I was there, but Bowling Green has always been my home base, pretty much my entire life. And then my dad served in Congress for 30 years, from 1959 to 1989. And so part of the time what we did, Bowling Green was always home, but they had to find us a place maybe for 5 months when the second semester of school started. And so my sister and I go to start at home, and then Dad find us a place, and then we'd drive home back and forth during that school part of the year, always back for summer, and most people never even knew we were missing it. But then I graduated from high school, from Bowling Green High School, and then also from Bowling Green State University, where I got my degree in history, and then I graduated from the University of Toledo College of Law.
Okay. Well, Ohio born and bred. Huh? Bob, tell us the secret about having such a long and happy marriage to Marcia.
Well, Marcia and I have been married, I can't believe it now, for 36 years. Maybe she might say, she can believe it's been 36 years.
Long enough.
But, you know, it's, we've both had very interesting career paths. And Marcia's been in higher education. She was at Bowling Green State University for 25 years in the development side, so the fundraising and all of that. She is now at the University of Finland, I can't believe, in her 9th year as a vice president there. And so she has the development, the alumni, and they also have a Mazza Museum there, which is the largest collection of children's book art in the world. I think they have 14 or 16,000 different drawings. And so her job is literally 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. My job is 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. But we both have always worked as much as we possibly can, that if she can be with me, she'll come. If I can be with her, I'll be at her events. Last night, we were both together in Napoleon at a Republican dinner. But if she, and I know a couple of weeks ago, I was at a university event with her. So we really want to make sure that we help each other. And she's been fantastic. I can say this honestly, she's given me a lot more than I've been able to give her, and all the time, because I've been gone so much. And she's been a great mom with our 2 daughters, and so she can throw a lot of balls up in the air at one time and keep them all up there.
Okay, well, I guess that's the secret. When did you first decide to become politically active?
Well, you know, that's a good question. I get that asked frequently, because especially with my dad. My dad served, he came again from a very small town, grew up in the Depression, one of 6 kids. My grandpa was a barber in a very small town in Wood County, but they were living in Hancock County. Dad was the first person to graduate from high school in his family. It was 1938, and probably like going to the moon, when some teachers probably convinced him to try to go to college. So he hitchhiked to then Findlay College. And Dad was elected then after he was an attorney to the state Senate in 1952. And those were in the back of the days when there were only 2-year terms.
Okay.
And so Dad served 3 2-year terms then, and then also being elected to Congress. And so a lot of people think, oh, you must have instantly, that was what you were going to do. And no, it wasn't probably until I was practicing law, but now my sister and I would always go to all of the political events and all the other types of meetings with my mom and my dad, because we wouldn't see anybody. And so Dad pretty much, when he was going someplace, we all went. And so I grew up always seeing it. And I think it's important that, as I grew up, that, I thought about other courses, but it was practicing law and also covering so many meetings for my dad. Dad always had, I had what I call dadisms. And I wrote a lot of them down after my dad passed away, so I'd never forget them. But one of the things my dad said was, there's 2 types of people that get involved in public service. There are those that want to be a politician and those who want to be a public servant. And a politician sees how much they can take from the people they represent, while public servants sees how much they can give of themselves. And, and the vast majority of the people out there are really good public servants. And again, we all know who those politicians are. But, if you want to make a difference, if you want to make sure that you're not going to be just a complainer, and you want to be on the front line to help people. And this is what it's all about, helping people. And then so I made that decision that I think the best course I could do is to serve the people that are around me.
Okay. So your dad was your role model here.
Well, yeah, because Dad, he worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week too. And I remember when I was in high school, if it was a Saturday afternoon, if I was studying, this is long before, people had answering machines and the telephone would ring. About maybe 8, 9 calls would come in, and I'd write if anybody called, I'd write all the information down. Dad would get home, and he'd sit down at the telephone and start returning all his phone calls. And so it's that constituent service that's been so important.
What's the best preparation you think for holding public office?
I think one of the most important things is know your community. Know the people you're going to represent and who they are, what they believe, what they think, and that's always being out there. And so, if I'm at the grocery store, people know who I am, and they'll come up. I try never ever to leave home without my business cards on me. Okay. Because I know one time years back, I left my cell phone in the car, and Marcia had sent me to the store for something, and I got back in. I noticed she had called, and I thought, oh, she forgot something. So I called her back. Said, "Where are you at?" And I told her, and she said, "You've been gone 45 minutes." I said, "Well, one item you needed was back in the one side, and I didn't have my card, so I had to go up and ask the cash register folks if I could have a piece of paper. They had to run a piece of tape off for me and a pencil." And then I went to the other side to get something else. Somebody else had a problem, and I went right back up to I knew where the pencil was this time, so I could write it down. But again, you have to be out, because I don't get the Rotarians upset, but I've been a Kiwanian for a good number of years. I was president of our club and did work as a director, and also incorporated our 501c4 scholarship fund. But it's knowing your area and the needs that people have out there.
Understand. How did you reach your decision to run for the House again? What criteria did you use to make that decision?
Well, I first ran for the House in 1988 after my dad retired, and I lost the election by 27 votes. Wow. And so, I was very fortunate. I was elected as Wood County Commissioner 2 years later. Wood County, one thing about being a commissioner, you're doing all kinds of things. I mean, so you're on the front line. And so commissioners in Ohio have a very broad jurisdiction. And after being reelected in midterm, the state Senate seat came up, and I was elected to the state Senate, and then I was selected to the state House for 4 terms. And then, unfortunately, when Paul Gilmer passed away, then I ran in a special election in 2007 and won. Tell
us about a typical day in the life of a representative.
Well, if you're looking at down in Washington, probably the best way to look at it this way is I'm an early riser. I get up about 4:30 in the morning to get my day going.
Wow.
And I try to always be at the desk in D.C. at 7 o'clock in the morning, because that's when I really start my day. Because a lot of times, well, this past week, my first meeting started in my office at 7:45, and so you usually figure maybe 20 to 25 minutes for each meeting. And so I had back meetings there, and then I'm on the WHIP team, and so we had WHIP meeting, which means what are we going to have on the floor, and we're looking at those things. Then you might have subcommittees, or what we had a markup this past week meeting. We had a bill, we had, I think it was 18 plus bills that we were going to have up for votes on the floor. And if we were going to move that direction. And so the next thing was, of course, we had a 12-hour markup. So we started at 10 o'clock in the morning, finished at 10 o'clock at night, plus 2 vote series in between. Got back from that, and then I went right back to my office and sat at the desk to get all the work done that the staff had given me, because we've come up with a pretty good, unique system. We got to keep when you have 731,000 constituents right now, that's going to go up over 786,000 when the new term starts.
Right.
But we've got a system that I kind of implemented years ago. We have a very large 3-ring notebook that everyone has a pocket part in. So if they want me to read it, see it, sign it, whatever, they have their individual ones. So I go through everything, and so they also, I review every legislative letter that goes out. No, I read them all. And so there's another file folder or a notebook of those. Then there's another notebook of all of the constituent letters in the district that I read every one of those, and then I sign those. So, but I really believe you have to be hands-on, because by doing that, you know exactly what's going on. Because all of a sudden, if you start seeing a trend, because we also have monthly reports, but what I can actually see, a trend. Okay, why are we having issues maybe in this part of the district with a certain federal office? Well, in other areas, we're not having the same issue.
Something's going on.
So something might be off. And so that's why it's really important for me to do that. So that's a typical day is 12 hours. They can be 13, 15 hours. And then, of course, in the district, you're in the car almost all the time going from all the different counties to cover them.
Why have you been named as the most effective member of one of the most effective members of Congress?
Well, I believe in work, but here's another reason. It's just not me. I've been blessed. This is my 8th term in Congress with having a great staff, and they're all willing to work, and that's really important. But I also am very, very fortunate. I serve on one of the most important committees. And we believe it is the most important committee. It's the Energy and Commerce Committee. So we have energy, healthcare, telecommunications. We have a commerce, which covers a lot of different areas, and environment, and we also have oversight. I've served on all 6. I currently serve on 3. At one time, I served on 4. I've chaired one of them, but I'm a firm believer in this. And in all my years in the Ohio legislature, I want to legislate. That's what I firmly believe in. And if you're going to legislate, you've got to work in the committee, and you've got to make sure you get the work done. And so one of the best things I bought for my office, I have in my store, in my closet, in my office, I have 8 folding chairs. I can get 15 people in my office at one time, or I can get 16 if I sit on the desktop. And but when I've worked on very major pieces of legislation, I bring everybody in. And I'm a firm believer, what Ronald Reagan said a long time, that if you're with me 85% of the time, you're my friend. He also said that I'd rather get 80% of something and go off the cliff with all flags flying. But you can always come back and get it. But if you you get to a point and you never keep proceeding, you got to start all over again in the next Congress. So it's really important to me that we work together. One piece of legislation that I'm going to be working on again, we got it done 2 Congresses ago, was the autonomous vehicle legislation.
Right.
And so just staff meetings alone, committee staff alone, we had 300 meetings. And then I can't tell you how many meetings I was involved in, not only in Washington and Ohio, but across the country. But I want to hear from everybody, because we've got to make sure that we're getting this legislation right. And so it's working, and it's working it through. And it's just not like saying, well, I'm just going to, what we call drop a bill, meaning you're going to have a piece of legislation out there. It's working it. And I did that in the Ohio legislature, and that was a great place for me to really, because I chaired the Judiciary Committee in the state Senate, and I was able, you understand how you've got to work something to get a bill across the finish line, and that's reaching out. And then you've got to reach out to the Senate, because that bill is going to go over there.
What characteristics should voters be looking for in a candidate?
Well, I think the number one thing is that you better be willing to listen. I think that's so important. Sometimes you might tend to think you're just going to tell everybody what you think, but that's not the way it works, because, again, when new members come in, if I'm talking with them, I always tell them the same thing. I say, you go through, we have 3 office buildings. I said, we all have the exact same first name on our nameplates. It says representative.
Yes.
And so that means one thing: you're there to represent the people. It's not you're there to tell the people what they think. You're there to represent them.
Understand. What are your qualifications for being a representative?
Well, and again, I'm willing to be out there. I want to listen. I'm going to spend the time to do it. And again, this is if somebody thinks this is a job that is a 5-day-a-week job, or there's a lot or something like that, it's not. You've got to be willing to say this: is that if somebody comes up to you at the gas station and has a problem, if you needed to go someplace right then, you stop. That person is your top priority. At the grocery store, as I mentioned earlier, but people want to have that communication with you. Now, are we always going to agree? No, but the number one thing is that you've got to hear it. And so I think that it's the hearing, but it's also willing to put the work in. But it's also having the qualifications, and again, I've been blessed in my life, because again, not only on the public service side, but also being able to practice when I was practicing law. But just having a great ability that I had in my earlier life to also, through my dad, to see, and when you're out, that you're seeing all these people that have a problem. And if a person has a problem, that could be the most important thing. Some people might think it might not be important, but to them, it's very, very important. And that's why I've always listened to what my dad said about make sure you're working for your constituents.
Understand. Do you think that having the long-term experience of being a representative and having a series of successful bills that you've sponsored gives you an advantage in the election that's coming up?
Well, I think it is, because again, for some people, just getting lost in the tunnels around that place is the first problem. You got to figure out how to get from point A to point B. Okay. But it's also knowing who you need to get a piece of legislation going, and how to work it. And again, my seniority now, I'm one of the senior members now on our committee. We have 57 members. And on our side, I'm one of the top senior members now on the Energy and Commerce Committee. And I also was fortunate in my earlier days in the House of Representatives. I also served on the Budget Committee, the Agriculture Committee, and Transportation and Infrastructure Committees. So I've had a very good broad background that it's very unique that you can bring that forward. I think that every member of Congress should always have a time that they should spend on the Budget Committee, just to get to understand how it works. And that we're not just throwing around a few numbers here, but how these numbers all come together and what's going to happen down the road. And one of the things that's great about being on the Energy and Commerce Committee is that we see all the innovation out there. But this one, I always say, we have to look beyond the horizon 5 to 10 years. And that's why it's so important. It's just not to have that tunnel vision, because I've seen people come into Congress or the state legislature that were pretty much a one issue. And it's like, no, there's multiple issues you have to be involved in.
Change gears a little bit. Why are we facing runaway inflation, and what could be done about it to bring it under control?
Well, if you look at what happened last year, early on in the Biden administration, and also when, of course, the Democrats control the House and the Senate, they passed a $1.9 trillion piece of legislation. And the question was it even needed? But the other problem was, when you pass a $1.9 trillion piece of legislation, it wasn't paid for. And so, when you're looking at over a $30 trillion national debt right now, you're just adding that on. And so when you have this massive government spending going on, the infrastructure package wasn't fully paid for, and then you see this Inflation Reduction Fund, which is an interesting name for something because we don't see it happening. But we see but when you pass legislation without paying for it, it's going to add up. And so this is what we've seen from having almost nobody's even talking about inflation to having the highest inflation we've had in over 40 years. And so when went ticked over 9%, and then when the president was celebrating the income or the Inflation Reduction Fund at the White House, it's the same day that inflation actually went up higher than the day before at 8.3%. So the numbers, I always tell people, you have to be not just seeing the inflation side, because what it's doing to the economy and to people at home with their cost of living, for everything from the grocery store to buying your kids shoes, you name it. But one of the things you always have to look to is when again, going back to my budget committee days, I always want to know is how much interest are we going to have to pay in 10 years? That's the way the Congressional Budget Office works, and I've had them in my office over this year and last year. I call it, it's called like a rescoring, because they're off because something has to be changed. But I've always been telling people we're going to be paying $1 trillion like in 2031, 2032. Well, unfortunately, when the new numbers came out, I was wrong. It's going to happen in 2030. So in 2030, we're going to pay $1 trillion just to pay the interest on the debt, which means we'll probably have to borrow the money just to pay the interest. And it'll become the third highest payment that we have in the federal budget. The third highest, just paying interest.
Yeah.
So, and it's not defense, it's going to be above it. It's going to be defense will be below it. So this is why it's very, very scary out there that, this is where the federal government has to do one thing. You have to live within your means. Yeah. And I've been one to say we need to have a constitutional amendment to say that we have to balance our budget. Here in the state of Ohio, we have to do it. I think in 47 states, it's either in their statute and their constitutions, they have to do it. But when things get, tight, you've got to cut just like at home.
Why are the rates of major crimes going up in many U.S. cities, and what can be done to turn around this outbreak?
Well, I think you can look at different factors out there. I think that one, that you've got to look to the prosecutors, the DAs, the district attorneys. Your job out there. Years ago when I was in law school, I worked in the Wood County Prosecutor's Office. And, you have to understand there's folks out there that are really bad, and you got to do something. But you can't have lax prosecutors in some of these cities not prosecuting their cases and just letting people go, or saying, we're not even going to think about going out, because you might have somebody out there that what we used to have, I remember when I was practicing law, a pre-sentence investigation. If somebody's been, after they've been convicted of the crime and they're going through the process, but all of a sudden, if you don't even get to the point of even saying you're going to bring anybody to trial, and just saying you're going to just open the doors up and say, go away. But unfortunately, those folks go right back out there to the community, and they a lot of times are doing something even worse. So I think one of the things is we got to make sure that we're having our laws are being enforced. And, it's not, and trust me, I for 11 years I did mostly just judiciary work. When I was chairing in the Senate, the Judiciary Committee, I chaired the criminal in the House of Representatives here in Ohio. And it's like, folks, we've got so many laws on the books right now. Let's enforce what you got. The other issues out there, of course, is that when you see with the crime out there, that you've got to have the backing of our police, because all of a sudden, if you're telling the police that don't enforce certain laws, then what do you do with them? I ride with the Highway Patrol every year, and I tell you, I think a lot of citizens ought to just ride with their law enforcement and do it later in the day or at night.
Yeah.
If you want to find out how would you like to be a single person out there, and I know in my years in the legislature talking with state troopers, and I was riding with folks up in Northwest Ohio, But the ones in southeastern Ohio back then, and probably still today, your radios might not always be working. You're out by yourself at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night, pulling a car over or coming up to a car that's stopped.
Scary.
And it takes a very unique person that can get out there and do that. So we need to back them, and so it's important. So, but as I said, the laws are out there, and its main thing is right now is enforce the laws that are on the books.
And you go a little bit further. Has the disruption of the nuclear family played a role in these increasing crimes?
Well, and I'm a firm believer that you need a family. There's a lot of kids out there that have no families and they just turn loose. I mean, there's nobody watching over them.
Yeah.
And I was blessed, and my sister and I, because we came from a very strong family, and my dad came from a family of 6. My mom came from a family of 7. They were all Depression era. But one of the things that we always learned was no matter what, we all stuck together.
Yeah.
And we were always together. I remember my dad coming home on when he'd been in Congress, he used to take the train. On Friday morning, we'd pick him up at the train station in Bowling Green at 7 o'clock. And the thing that struck fear in my heart in the morning at breakfast, when Dad said, I'm going to stop by the school and see how you kids are doing. Uh-oh. I was always worried, because I always usually knew one thing that was coming from it. I was going to get more homework. And the teacher said, you ought to be reading this now or that. But it takes, and I was blessed because I was, as a kid, I was not a very strong student until I finally figured out about 3rd, 4th grade why I was even, what the whole purpose was. But that was having 2 parents that never said, okay, you just do what you want to do. They said, nope, you've got to have guidance. And so, having that structure of a family is so absolutely important.
Understand. What needs to be done on our southern border?
Well, I've been down there twice. I was down last year, and I was down about in 2018. And I think it's important that, if people haven't been down there and seen this, you couldn't even recognize what happened from 2018 to 2021. I can tell you right now, I'm going to probably be going back down there again this year. And from each year, you can't even imagine it. When we were down there back in 2018, our Border Patrol said one thing: just give us the ability to enact barriers, is that they call them barriers, and they said we can stop 95%. 95%.
Wow.
But, and you don't have to build a wall from sea to shining sea. Just listen to the people that are out there on the front lines.
They know.
And so they let them get their job done. But, this year alone, in this fiscal year, we've had 2 million people cross the border, and this is costing all Americans billions of dollars then. Now, we have to have an immigration process where people, because yesterday, in fact, my district director always drops off all the mail over the weekend for me to sign, so I sat at the kitchen table, and I can't tell you how many letters I signed to people that are going to be naturalized here in another week or so. And those are all people that went through the process of getting it done and doing it right. But the first thing is listen to the people out there, because when I was down there the last time, it was the most surreal experience being down there at 10 o'clock at night and just seeing these people coming up in like about 8 at a time. And they'd be all directed underneath this big highway overpass that they put up all these tables, and so they can process. But if you take 40% of your people offline, meaning our Border Patrol, that means not only aren't we catching a lot of people, but this is not coming from one region. These are people coming from all over the world. It's just like and the smugglers. These people are all having to pay to do this. So it could be anywhere from $3,500 to $4,000, maybe for Central America, up to $70,000 to smuggle somebody in from China. Now the question is, who's getting smuggled in from China?
Yeah.
So you look at these numbers, and then you look at also what's happening is the drugs that are coming in. Yeah. We had 107,000, this is under our jurisdiction and committee, we had 107,000 people that died last year in the United States from drug overdoses. Yeah. Over 70,000 was because of fentanyl. Where's fentanyl coming from? China. How's it getting to the United States? The southern border through Mexico. And now the Mexican cartels are mixing up their own fentanyl. And if folks don't understand what fentanyl is, only a flake of it will kill you. And so a lot of people think that they're taking another narcotic drug out there, and it's not, and all of a sudden, they're dead. And this is how serious it is. It's the leading killer now from people from ages of 18 to 45 now in this country. So we've got to get control of our border, because it's just not the influx of people coming here that need to do it through the right process, but it's also making sure that we stop all these drugs from coming into the country.
You mentioned China. What's the major challenge from China beyond the fentanyl?
Well, first of all, we always have to remember that we're not playing with them on the same plane. Because again, the Chinese, you always need to say it's communist China. So they're not looking at the rest of the world the way a democracy might. That, we got to work with everybody, everybody else. They're out for one thing. They want to be on the top.
Right.
And they're going to do everything they possibly can. So when all these companies were going to China, you had to give them all your trade secrets and everything else that you're coming in. And but what we have seen now is because of COVID and the supply chain issues, we're seeing a drawing back. A lot of companies are now saying we've got to shorten our supply chain, because all of a sudden all this money was going into China,
Yep.
and then you couldn't get your product back when you needed it. And so we're really seeing, especially in the United States, Canada, Mexico, and other countries, that the supply chain is really being pulled back in to make it much shorter. I know of companies in Ohio here that they're getting a lot of their product now from 15 to 50 miles away, and they never have to worry about trains, train issues or issues that might have happened on out on the Pacific when we saw off the California coast all those ships that couldn't get in. So everything is very close, and so people are saying, here we are. So, but we've got great networks in this country, but here in Ohio, we got a road system, that no one can really, I'd say, equal because of all of our interstate system. We got the Great Lake right with Lake Erie that we can get transportation from. We have our airports, and again, we have a great train system with our trains coming through Ohio to move the product. So it's all these things that we do, but but again, China has really made it tough. It's just like when COVID hit, they were the first ones to do what? Buy up all the personal protection equipment that you could find out there. And so it was being made in one part of the world, and so they got it, and it's like, folks, we got to make sure we're taking care of ourselves here.
Understand. Is big tech, social media, showing bias by centering only one political party while promoting the other? Should these companies be treated as public utilities? Is this kind of thing being talked about on your committee?
Well, I'm the ranking member on the Communications and Technology Subcommittee. And when we saw the internet in its early days, we had something called Section 230.
Right.
And Section 230 was out there to say, look, if it was mainly to deal with pornography. If somebody's out there on your platform and have pornography there, we gave them what we called a sword and a shield. The sword was they could take it down, and the shield was they were protected because they were taking something off right then. But what we've seen happening is that some of the companies are, they're with their algorithms or who knows what, and this is what we've been, we'll have a lot more if we have the House being Republican next time, I'll guarantee you we'll have a lot more hearings on this. But what we're seeing is that these companies have all of a sudden starting to take down, they can't deny, because if Republicans seem to be being taken down more than on the Democrat side. So we want to make sure that one of the things that some people say is, well, why don't we just do away with Section 230? Well, if we do away with Section 230 in its entirety, what we'll do then is prevent startup companies from ever getting into it.
Okay.
And because they won't have that protection. And so, we've been looking at legislation as to how can we make it that maybe the big guys aren't going to have the same protections as somebody that's starting up, because again, we want to make sure that there is competition out there. And we've seen it in different from you name the platform, and we all it always seems to be in the news every couple of weeks that all of a sudden there's somebody else has had information taken down, and it's always like this. Then, oh, sorry about that. But it's oh, somebody must have changed the algorithm or something like that. Well, who's making the algorithms up that do all these things? And these are things that we're working on in committee, especially subcommittee right now.
Okay, difficult to legislate, easy to talk about.
Well, but you want to make sure you get it right, because if you don't get it right, then we have a real issue down the road. Then because you can't, because once legislation's out there and it's signed into law, you might be able to rush it through real quick, and you go, whoop, made a mistake, and it's always tougher a lot of times to get it fixed.
Yeah. What's your position on mandated comprehensive sex education for elementary school children?
I think that's up to the parents. That's not for the school. That's mom and dad.
Yeah. The should, and this is really a common sense issue, should biological males be allowed to compete in female athletic competitions?
Well,
especially in school.
Yeah, Marcia and I, we have two daughters, and early on, both girls played t-ball. They played fast pitch. They played volleyball. They participated. But would it be fair to put boys against them? That's we were out at the ballparks watching. You could see different games going on, and our girls advanced through, and they were playing pretty good softball. But to put boys into sports with girls, it's not right, because again, all of a sudden the girls will start having a problem saying, I can't compete against them, and what do? They don't participate.
They drop out.
And one of the great things I've seen in my lifetime is how many girls, younger girls, are now in sports. Because it used to always be that, oh, that's not what you do. But now girls are in everything, and we want to make sure that they get out there and they have that chance to compete. But you got to have it on a level playing field, and not say that we can have boys playing in the girls' sports. So it's important right now. I really think that we have to make sure that the girls have the ability to participate and play, but that's not going to happen if all of a sudden you're starting to let males compete against them.
Understand. Is chaos being created in our society for some long-range political goal?
Well, it depends who's out there, because there's a lot of chaos that comes in from overseas. Now, let's talk about that for a little bit. If you think about what Russia, China, it could be North Korea, it could be Iran, they get on the end of the internet and they start putting stuff out. And so the problem I always tell people is always be careful, because you don't know who's posting some of this stuff, because it could be for disinformation purposes. And so that's why, for me, every morning what I do is early in the morning, I look at about 6 newspapers online, and then 3 of them are what we call Hill newspapers. So I get a good idea of what's going on for the day, because a lot of times I don't get to watch very much news at all, maybe only 20 minutes a day on TV, but I've already seen what the story is going to be for the day.
Okay.
So I think people need to really make sure that they verify. I know I've had through the years, my staff, they come in and say, oh, we found this incredible story and we need to do something. I said, okay, it's just like what I always told them this. It's just like when you're in law school. The definition of receiving stolen property is this: if it's too good to be true, it is. And so what I tell my staff is this: if you can't find a second source for that story, forget it. It's not. It's you got to make sure you can back it up. And when you talk about, and then so nationally, there's other people that could be putting stuff out, and I've had people tell me that I'll ask them where they got their information from. And they say the internet, and I say and this is true.
Yeah.
And then I say everything that's not on the internet isn't always true. And I've had people tell me, Yes, it is, because you can't put anything on the internet that's not true.
I see.
So, that's when I have to walk them through how certain things are on a certain story that they might be talking about and looking at the total picture. But the folks have to understand that, always verify your sources.
Okay, wise. Should merit be the primary determinant of success in our society?
Well, this is a free society, and I think that some people get confused sometimes. They think that in this country that the government's going to guarantee a success. It's not. What our Constitution and our system says is we're going to give you the ability to succeed, but we can't guarantee you that you're going to have that success. So I think it's important that we always make sure that we're wide open for people, that you can get out there and, if you've got a dream. And that's one of the great things about my job. When I'm home in the district, I go through thousands of businesses. I go through schools at the same time. I go through everything. I get to see everything. But when I go through some certain businesses that were started by a husband or a wife or an individual, and what they've been able to do in that period of time. First of all, I always tell them, I never even dreamed this up. I say, how did you come up with this? But this is why we have everybody, if you look at how all of the different things are being invented in the world, look where they're being invented in this country. Because people see that, it's the old word, it's the land of opportunity.
Yeah, right. Are changes needed to increase the integrity of the electoral process? What about photo IDs and unsolicited mail-in voting?
Well, I think it's important that we know who you are, because years ago when I was a precinct committeeman, that we had to you had to find people to work for the polls. They were the precinct workers, and one of the things that's important is from years ago was people weren't moving. When somebody walked in that door, you knew exactly who it was.
Yeah.
Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
It was a very, odd day that somebody would walk in that you didn't know who it was. Well, times have changed. We have, societies, people are moving a lot more,
Yep.
and they're going from point A to point B. And so, it's important that we have folks out there that can present that ID to show that, yes, this is me, because we don't want people going around voting in different places and saying that's that they're claiming to be John Smith when they've gone someplace else and they were Richard Smith. Just go down the entire list. But we don't want to have that happen. And I think here in the state of Ohio, I think that we've, through the Secretary of State's office, they've done a very good job of making sure that people can be assured that our election system works. Now, I have a problem if all of a sudden you have just this carte blanche, you're going to send everybody out an absentee ballot, because who's going to control it? Do you have to have the signature on it to make sure that that's who that person is? And then that's when you can get into this quote unquote ballot harvesting and all these things that we're really concerned about, that is important that we know and people know that the elections are fair and there's integrity in the system.
Understand. Should all human life be respected?
Well, absolutely. And I've always been pro-life, and I think it's important, because again, all these babies and all the things that they can achieve, it's just incredible what can happen in their lives. And so, human life is very, very important.
Do you believe that having seat belts in school buses might be a good idea to protect children?
Well, and that's something I know that there's been a discussion with. And so I need to have the folks come in, because again, to see what the statistics are and I know that the safest way I've seen in the past of getting kids to school is in a school bus. And so I'd have to really sit down with folks to see exactly what that would be, and if any other injuries or whatever could be prevented on those buses.
Understand. How can we have affordable as well as high quality health care?
Well, you want to make sure that you're always thinking about the patient. That's your first priority. You want to make sure that that patient's being taken care of. And you want to make sure you have, as you mentioned, that quality and the cost, and making sure that's all so that person doesn't have a problem. And we want to make sure that if an individual out there has a medical issue, that they're being treated. And another area that we've talked about for years is what about in having some kind of a tort reform in the country that also drives up the cost. But one of the things that I'm worried about from the other side is what they've come up with, and they passed it out of the House, is if all of a sudden they start talking about on certain types of drugs, that you could actually have drugs not coming to market then. And there's the statistics out there show how many drugs might not have come to market over the last 10 years. And because again, the United States is the place where the drugs are being found, and hopefully cures are being found. But if all of a sudden we can't get the cure out there because of different things that are happening on the government side and saying what you can and can't do, because again, for Alzheimer's or for cancer, or for MS, you think about all the different types of diseases out there that we want to get cured. But I'll guarantee you, that what will happen is if it goes the other direction, and all of a sudden the companies say we can't do it because every time you start on something doesn't mean it's going to be successful. There's a lot more failures than you have successes out there.
How can the opiate epidemic be overcome? We talked a little bit about fentanyl.
Well, first, we talked about, because several years ago I had meetings at the University of Findlay and also Defiance at the college there, and bringing in people that the experts in the field. But first of all, our problem is I asked, the question is this: how come? And again, this is our committee. And that the question came up, why is it that it seems like in the United States we have this horrible opioid addiction, and we don't hear about it anyplace else?
Yeah.
And the person that was testifying said in one word, or two words, we overprescribe. So, what I'm seeing at a lot of my hospitals now is that, and I remember being at one not too long ago, they say you're going in for surgery. They bring you in and they say you're going to have this procedure done. Mm-hmm. Now, when you're in recovery, you're not going to feel that great. So they are going to try to work it through with a non type of opioid type drug, and also working with better pain management for people. Mm-hmm. And so, because otherwise, what's happened is that when the opioids run out, and we've said things like different things, because we had House Bill 6 it was HR 6 several years ago, and one of my pieces of legislation was included in it. But we took all these things into consideration, how we can, and we saw actually things tapering. We had about 73,000 people die. Went down to about 71, but then all of a sudden we saw this horrible spike again we were seeing on the southern border. But it's getting people off the opioids and making sure that, if you're going to prescribe it to somebody, don't send somebody home with a whole bottle, because when what happens is where do these people now, other people get hooked on the opioids? They go to grandma's medicine cabinet when they're there, and grandma goes in and there's one pill left. And then the other thing is, what about a blister pack? All of a sudden, instead of giving a person a bottle of pills, you get 3 in a blister pack, and that's it. So it's working with the pain management side, but again, we've got to get people to understand that, every so often you're not going to feel good. It's just, and they want instantaneous. And this is also, they get off the opioids, they're not going to get them prescribed again. And then what happens? Well, they turn to what? Maybe heroin. And all of a sudden they're buying heroin for maybe for $5 or $10. And when they get hooked, then the dealer's charging them a lot more. And that's when also, you don't know what you're getting. It could have fentanyl on it. And that's the end of you then. And so this is why it's so important that we win this, because if we don't, we're going to see more people that are going to be addicted. We're going to see more people dying. We're going to see more families ruined because of it.
Do you think that politicians and high-level government bureaucrats should have term limits or restrictions following their public service?
You know, when it comes to term limits, you know, we enacted term limits in our Constitution here in Ohio that went into effect in 2000. And I think that these are a couple of things people need to think about. I can give you two instances, if I may. One time I was working, this one I was in the state legislature, and term limits were just about ready to come in. And I called over to a department for a constituent. And, you know, we have very small staff. So, you know, if you're doing your job right, you're making a lot of these calls. And I was talking to this quote unquote bureaucrat, and I explained it, and there's kind of dead silence. And then I said, are you still there? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, can we get this worked out for this person? He said, I don't know. And I said, well, wait a minute, why don't you just do this? I'll just bring the file over to your office. You're only about 10 minutes away from me. And he said, that's not necessary. And I said, well, oh, so we can work on it over the phone. He said, no. And I said, what do you mean? And these are his exact words. And this is over 20 years ago. He said, you guys are going to come and you guys are going to go, but I'm still going to be here. Then you have legislators that are getting near the end of their terms, and they might want to get a job in the administration. And they say, well, I can't vote for that piece of legislation or work on that because I want to make sure I get this job over here sometimes. So I'm not saying that happens, that's a lot, but once in a while you hear it. And so I think that the best term limit happens on election day. And it's really important for people out there to understand what's going on, to make sure that they can get this thing, the right person into office, that they can say, you know what, it's absolutely important that we do what's right. Because if you're going to have term limits, then everybody that works in public service that's not elected, you know, should they say at the end of, if you have an 8-year term for a legislator, then 8 years, everybody's out. And so I think so what you really do with term limits, you embolden the legislative branch and the executive branch, and the legislative branch all of a sudden starts going down because you're not at the same level as the executive branch.
What federal agencies need to be scrutinized by the House?
Well, you know, boy, we're going to be doing a lot when if the Republicans take over the House. But the most important thing is this: one of our jobs is to do oversight, and that's to be doing it all the time. And we're not doing the oversight. It's just like we've only had the EPA director before us in committee, I think, only twice, almost since January of last year. It's important that these people are coming before us all the time. And I mean all the time, it could be every couple of months, but not such a long period of time. So when you think about energy in our committee, EPA is important. It's important to have the federal communications commissioners coming before us. We need to have them before us so you can have that dialogue back and forth. I know some of the FCC commissioners in the past. I've had 3 in my district. I bring them out so they can actually see what's going on. They always want to make sure that and some of them really like the experience of getting out to see what their rules are going to do. But, it's just like with the Internal Revenue Service, that there was a situation not so long ago that I was in a company, and this company was dealing with the IRS. The IRS was there, and they said, well, when we did this regulation, we never thought it was going to be like this. But it's just like, well, yeah, but everybody's living with it now. So this is why it's important. Every federal department, every federal agency needs to come before Congress all the time. So they're not sitting up in their offices thinking, well, nobody's looking over my shoulder. But that's our job, is to be there, asking the tough questions.
Tell us about some recent bills that you've sponsored.
Well, again, a bill that I've got coming back up is on autonomous vehicles. As I mentioned earlier, we had that piece of legislation we worked it, got it through the committee with a unanimous vote, passed on the House floor, went over the Senate, and unfortunately it died over in the Senate. But I'm bringing that bill back up. I'm working with Debbie Dingle, who's a Democrat from Michigan, on legislation on autonomous vehicles. Because again, unfortunately we've seen a spike. We were at about 37,000 people that passed away on the roads. We had 43,000 killed last year alone. So, we can do a lot of things to make sure that, from privacy to cybersecurity, making sure these vehicles are safe as anything else on the road, if not safer. Other things I've worked on is making sure we have accurate maps for broadband. When we looked at what happened, of course, with COVID and so many people were working from home, kids were trying to do their schoolwork from home. We don't want kids having to go to a fast food parking lot to get Wi-Fi service to do their homework. It's important, and so I've worked on a lot of different things with spectrum management, making sure that we have the spectrum out there, that we make sure that that is moving, that we have it. Because when you think about all of the cell phones and the computers and you name everything else, everything talking to each other out there, we're going to have, when autonomous vehicles are out there, we'll have more cars that will be using that. So farmers need the broadband. So it's making sure we have accurate maps, because because when you spend billions of dollars, you want to get to the unserved areas first and make sure that you get there served.
What can Avon Lakers do to help your campaign? Do you need volunteers?
We never turn down volunteers. And we always want to make sure that folks can get out there if they want to do door to door, if they want to do anything else, call their neighbors. That's always important, because I always tell folks this is that it's really important for people to hear from the people you know and trust. And because it's like, now why are you supporting that person? And so you have a good give and take on that then.
What's your website address?
Latta for Congress.
Latta for Congress.
Right.
Okay. And I know there's an email contact in there that would be good.
Because being a member of Congress, we have a pretty solid wall between what we do. So what we're doing now is all on the political side, but again, at the same time, in the other parts of the district that I have right now is where all the constituent and all the other work's done. Under House rules, we can't do any work in an area that we're getting until after you assume office on January the 3rd of next year.
Understand. In summary, what makes sense to you and what doesn't?
Well, first of all, I look at Ohio. And I look at Ohio, this is the land of opportunity. This is where my mom's family, they settled on farms in the 1840s in Putnam County. Dad's family came in to Ohio, maybe before 1800, and worked their way up to Northwest Ohio. But, I always tell people that we have certain things here that a lot of everybody else they don't have around the country. What do we have? We have water.
Yeah,
I talk to a lot of members, and they have no water. They can't water their crops aren't getting rain. They don't have the ability. We have this wonderful lake here that we need to make sure that we preserve our great lake. As I mentioned earlier, we have an incredible road system here to move product. We have a great rail network that runs through the state of Ohio that moves product back and forth. But the number one thing that we have here that I always say is our number one asset, it's our people.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've always said is this, we educate our kids from K through 12. We got great colleges here in the state of Ohio. And when I tell people that what we want to do is we want to keep our kids here, because again, it's to us and to me, okay, we always say, sometimes we don't have the greatest weather, but at the same time, we have 4 seasons. But it's our people that make this place work, and that's what drives me, because I want everybody to have that chance of being out there, getting what they want in the state of Ohio and succeeding. If you have a small business, you want to make it a big business, whatever you're going to do from that tiny startup. But it's just having that ability for people to get out there and to experience it.
Good luck in the election.
I appreciate it. Thanks very much for the time.
Okay. Thank you for watching. If you would like to appear on the show or know some interesting people who would like to appear, please send us their contact information, and we'll see what we could work out. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, seatbelts save lives.
The preceding program was presented to you by a community producer. The statements, views, and opinions expressed were not necessarily those of ALC TV or the City of Avon Lake.